All right. So, hello, how are you?
Me?
Yes,
I'm doing well. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited to
yes,
talk to students today
right.
about activities.
We just had a session on testing, and this is the next session for the day to day on activities. So, I'm very excited, and I'm sure our students are still joining in. So, if you don't mind, we would just, like to wait for 2 more minutes for the numbers to increase, and then we can begin.
Absolutely. That sounds good.
Yes. So meanwhile, I'll just welcome all the students. So good evening to students, to parents, to educators, counselors, and everybody who has joined us today across on the Filling Your Common App webinar series. And I'm very pleased to say that we have been successfully completed day one, and this is day two, session two on activities by Kristin Crosby from Ohio Wesleyan University, and who will be taking us through the activities section of the Common App, and I'm sure it'll be really insightful for you all. Also, talking a little about Next Genius. As you know, Next Genius offers full and partial tuition scholarships to grade 12 students and also students who are not in their grade 12 but are likely to be in a gap year. So, our applications for the year 2020-21 are already open. We are past 1 month with applications. So, do check out our website and apply for outstanding scholarships. And I'm very pleased to say that Ohio Wesleyan is one of Next Genius's partner college, and we are very happy to work with Ohio. So, without any further ado, I would like Christine to take over the presentation and go ahead.
All right. Well, I am so excited to be here today. My name is Kristin Crosby. I'm the Director of International Admission at Ohio Wesleyan, and I've been working in international admissions for a long time. So I'm excited to be able to share my knowledge with you. And I also want to say thank you to Next Genius. Even though this was our first year joining Next Genius, I found it to be an incredible partnership. I think we have 7 students enrolling this fall who are all Next Genius scholarship recipients. One is the full tuition, the others received other Next Genius scholarships, but the organization, the partnership, they didn't ask me to say this, but I just have to say they've been incredible to work with. They really care about the students and the match. And I think that the fact that they're offering these opportunities for you to get insights into the application process is very valuable. And it shows that they really care about the application process. So I'm going to talk to you today about activities. I know that recently you had a session on testing, which is a little bit less exciting. So hopefully the activities section will get you a little bit more pepped up and excited about starting your common application, thinking about yourself, thinking about the match. And I'll give you some helpful hints and walk you through it. And I also wanted to mention that if you are interested in learning more about Ohio Wesleyan, you can scan this QR code here. And I'll also have it at the end of the presentation if you don't have time to get out your camera and scan it here. But I will be walking you through the activity section and then giving you some helpful hints. So let's get started. So first of all, this is my email and my WhatsApp and my Skype. I love providing advice to students, and I do welcome you to contact me. Sadly, I'm not able to meet with students this fall at college fairs. This is usually what I love to do during the fall, travel to meet students in person, but I think you're all pretty lucky this year to be able to get such great information virtually. All right. So why do we ask for your activities and how does it benefit you? I want to say, first of all, don't think of it as a way to prove yourself. Really think of it as a way to share yourself. It gives you a chance to elaborate on what you've done, what you're passionate about, what you might see yourself doing in college. And it doesn't have to be limited to just the extracurricular activities that you've done. You can also include jobs, leaderships, talent, other involvement like community service, if you've done some charity fundraising, if you've done research, internships, and if you haven't done all of those things because of the pandemic, don't worry about it because like I said, You're not trying to prove yourself with the activity section. You're trying to share who you are and help us to get to know you. So the activities really just helps us to see who you are as a person, and it brings your application to life. So I kind of think of the activity section like this picture here, this colorful puzzle. All of these different puzzle pieces come together and build a sense and image of who you are. And as you can see, this puzzle doesn't necessarily present one clear picture, but this puzzle represents all of the different pieces that make up a person. So I think that's a good analogy of how we view the activity section. And the other thing that's great about the activity section, and that gives you some control over the application process, because it helps you shape how you decide how you want us to see you. So if you want us to see you as more of the athlete type, or somebody who's got lots of leadership, or somebody who dabbles in lots of different things, or maybe you're really passionate about one thing like astrophysics and you've done lots of research, or maybe you're crazy about Rubik's Cube competitions and mathematics, you can kind of shape how you want us to see you. And you don't have to necessarily create a persona in your activity section, but really you can think about it and be deliberate and figure out how you want us to kind of imagine who you are through this activity section. And the activity section also helps us in building our class. So this year's freshman class is the class of 2024. And we're trying to not just have a well-rounded class, but also make sure that, you know, we have students who are going to fit in and contribute. And so the other way that we use the activity section is, as we're reading it, we might make some notes and think, all right, I'm going to put this student in touch with this professor or this leader of a club, so that we can get you more information, but also get you engaged in our university before you even decide for sure that you're going to come. So it's really not about a contest or a competition. I think sometimes students think of the activity section as that they've got to prove themselves, they have to beat out everybody else. The more leadership, the more accolades that they can show, they're going to stand out more than somebody else, and we're going to choose them over other students. We're not tallying up your experiences. We're not keeping score about leadership, talents, or anything like that. We're not comparing you to other students. Really, we're just more concerned about your commitments, the depth of your commitment. It's not about the number of clubs and activities. It's really just to see what kind of match you are for our university. And as you're going into either your last year of high school, or maybe your second to last year of high school, don't think about getting involved in things just because it's going to look good on the application. And don't feel that you've got to fill out all 10 spaces in the Common Application. And then I'm going to check my questions now, because I've got some questions building up here and I want to make sure that I answer them. And this is a great question about not having any activities yet and wondering what to do. So I know I'm talking a lot about activities and all of the things that students put in their lists, but I also have to say that if you're somebody who doesn't yet have a ton of activities, or if the pandemic has prevented you from being involved in lots of different things and you feel like your activities list is going to be too short, I would not worry about that. So when I read an application, and when many of my colleagues read applications, we're just looking at you in your context. We're not comparing you to the entire applicant pool or everybody from your school or city or country. And really, we're just trying to get to know you. So if you're in grade 11 yet and you haven't started engaging in any activities, just think about what you're interested in. Don't think about it as building a resume. I know that's not what a lot of you are hoping to hear, but I'm just trying to say, don't feel pressure. So if you are somebody who is a school captain and you have leadership, I'm going to give you some pointers on how you can fill out the leadership information and the activity so that it can all fit in. And then I've got a question from Kumar who wants to know if we prefer progressive achievement or if you should diversify your activities. There's no right or wrong. So some students are going to have activities that all kind of lean towards one area. And then lots of other students might have a wide array, a diverse array of activities, and they both look great. So we don't choose or prefer one student over the other. We want to have some well-rounded students, some dabblers, and we also like to have students who really specialize and maybe delve really deeply into one thing that that they're really passionate about. I've got a question about, let's see here, activities before secondary school. Really, you don't need to go back into your middle school years and start listing those activities either. Because you're only limited to 10 spaces, you should really just be choosing the things that you're passionate about. Unless your involvement started in middle school years or before secondary and you're continuing it, then I'll show you on the Common App how you can put that information in there. All right. And then one other question before I go on, do extracurriculars hold more value than academics? I would say that even if you're somebody who has, just the most outstanding resume and leadership and talents, we're still really looking for an academic match. And although activities are a great way that we help to see if you're a match for our university, we're still making sure that we choose students who are going to be academically successful. So the academic record is going to be more important. So I'm going to get to some of these questions next. I do want to keep going with my presentation. Because I want to give you some tips on how to get started. So for the nuts and bolts, really you're going to start and you're going to choose a category. There's going to be all these corresponding categories, just as you see on the right here, an academic category, art category, etc. And I'm just going to see if I've got a note here. You're going to choose your category, and if a category if an activity falls under two different activities, it could be academic, it could be art, or maybe it's journalism, but it could also be research. You're going to go with the one that either seems more relevant to the activity, or maybe that seems more relevant to you. So of course you have to choose one of the categories, and you want to just give it some thought, which is more relevant or more relevant to you. If, as I said, you are limited to 10 spaces, you don't have to feel that you've got to fill all 10. Don't just start coming up with things because you think we need to see 10 activities. Sometimes people put things on there like they babysit for their siblings because they want to fill out that 10th space. Really only put that kind of thing in there if it's something that you devote a lot of time to. Maybe you are from a single parent home and you have to help take care of your siblings. So you want to think about the quality of the activity, how important it is to you and your life, and not just about filling up the activities list. So you're going to next describe the position held, and you're limited to 50 characters. So you want to be specific. So going back to some of these earlier questions here, if you are a house captain or the co-chair of something, or you're captain of Mali United Nations, captain of your sports team, this is where you're going to be describing the position held. And because it's limited to 50 characters, you don't have to use a complete sentence here, but definitely choose your words so that they're as most descriptive as possible, and try to get as close to using all 50 characters as possible with those specific descriptions of the position held. And then again, you're going to be specific in the organization name. So you want to make sure that you're not just using acronyms, that you're being detailed in the description of the organization, because I might not know all of the organizations that your school has to offer or your community has to offer. And I'll give you an example of that in a moment. So you want to be specific in the organization name, and then you'll get to describe the activity. And here you've got more space. You've got 150 characters, and this is where you're going to describe your accomplishments, describe the activity, or if there's an honor, and you want to be succinct and to the point. You do not need to use complete sentences because you're only limited to 150 characters. So you can use incomplete sentences, but it's a good idea to maybe use some active verbs, not too many adjectives. So if you want to use an adjective, make sure that it's a great descriptor of the description. And you don't need to repeat what's been typed. So if you've given us the organization name, if you've given us the position held, and we know the category, you don't need to repeat those things in the description unless there's space for you to do so. I'm going to just check the questions now because the questions keep rolling in. So let me scroll to the questions and see if there's anything to add. So there's a question about adding pictorial proofs for achievements. You don't necessarily have to add pictorial proofs, but if you feel like there's something that would be very and something that would enhance your activities, you could maybe create a website or a Google Drive or a Dropbox and add an URL. Now, what I should tell you about a URL when many of us are reading, we can't actually click on it. So I can't read your application and click on the URL and go right there. What I have to do is copy, paste, go to a website. But sometimes I do that because I am curious to see the pictures, the art. And if you're a fine arts student, you might be able to upload a portfolio. So that is something I would highly recommend if you are a fine arts student. I've got a question here about what if the activity is not part of any organization? That is fine. You can just kind of use that section, the organization name, to just describe. Maybe you founded the club. Maybe it's something that you do in your spare time. So think of how you might describe that activity if it's not affiliated with the organization name. And a question about if the activity is in, say, a biology curriculum developer. I would say a biology curriculum developer, that might be maybe career oriented, because it sounds like you're developing a curriculum to help younger students. It could be academic since it's biology related. So you want to just kind of think about what you've done with that and if it fits more into academic or it fits more into career oriented. Now I realize you're all in high school and I think it's still the case, but I remember hearing a while ago that in India, students can't have after school jobs. So career-oriented could be something that you do in school or community service that is developing skills that you might use in a future career. So if it's something that's leadership, like a leadership conference, that could fall under career-oriented. All right. So a question about unpaid internships. I want to say that there is a section, and I'm not seeing it listed here, about internships. If there's not one specifically related to internships, I would say an internship, even if it's unpaid, could fall under career-oriented, or it could fall under even work. And you could make a note that it's unpaid. So I'm going to go on to the next slide, but I will be sure to answer some of these questions. All right, here's some advice. And I put this picture here because sometimes students just want to fill those 10 spots and they're like, what could I do here as an activity? Oh, well, I did underwater yoga. I'll put that as an activity. So don't just kind of make things up. Don't try to feel that need to come up with anything and everything. I've seen some fantastic applications that have only listed 3 activities, and that's perfectly fine. You do want to list your activities in order of importance. I guess that's just because when we're reading the application, the first thing that we read, that makes the most impact to us. And you wouldn't want us to, not see it if we're just scanning the application briefly. So list your activities in order of importance. It's okay to change your tenses in the English language. So if you're currently involved, use the present tense. If it's something that you're not involved in any longer, you can use the past tense. It's perfectly fine to mix that up. Use the language that you would typically use. Don't try to make yourself sound like something you're not. So use language and vocabulary that is something that you'd use in your everyday life. And I will give you some examples in a moment of what I mean by that. And if it seems like you keep choosing the same category over and over again, maybe just try to think if one of those activities could fit more broadly into another category. It's not really that important, but just something that I do bring up. And if it's possible to add grade level or timing or hours, actually, I think you will be able to do that in the Common Application. You'll get to say all the years that you were involved, as well as how many hours per week and weeks per year that you were involved. So that's great. Well, we do look at that. And so sometimes if a student says, I was just involved in this activity for 1 week, period, I kind of think like, well, why did you put that down? Sometimes it does make sense, if it was a conference or a workshop or a skill or an internship. That does make sense. But it all depends. So think about how important it is to you in shaping who you are today before you decide to list it. And if you've been involved in it for all 4 years or 3 years, definitely put those grade levels. Maybe think of it as an average. So if 1 year you were involved way more than another year, just think about the average time that you were involved. And don't worry if you did an activity and you were only involved in it for 1 year. I'd rather know that you're involved in it for just 1 year than you're, not being truthful about your involvement. I really want to know what you've truthfully done, and you don't need to feel like you have to inflate your involvement or your time. And it's, as I said, it's perfectly fine if you've discontinued an activity. There are only so many hours in a day. And as you progress through high school, we realize that you're going to start getting more interested in things, specialize in certain things. You're going to outgrow things you're interested in, and school does take over. So we know you're only human, and you're not expected to be doing 10 activities all 4 years of high school. All right. And then when you're coming up with your list, if you're having trouble trying to decide what activities to put down, either because you don't have that many or you have too many, think of your top 3. And then if you have trouble finding more activities, maybe think of 3 activities your friends and family might associate with you. And think about maybe some of your proudest moments, your accomplishments. So for the student in the audience who said you haven't done any activities, I bet you have. And it is okay for any of you who are doing activities that maybe you have to do for school. If anybody's doing the International Baccalaureate and you have CAS requirements, I think that counts. You're involved in it. You're active in it. So it is okay to put down things that you're required to do for school. Also think about who you are today. What activities, what events, what circumstances, what skills have helped build you to who you are today? And think about your values. What's important to you? Are you somebody who is passionate about gender equality? Are you somebody who's passionate about the environment and other values? So that might help shape what activities you decide to put on your activity list. All right, I'm going to go back to my list of questions and see what we've got here. So a question here about fundraisers for the community, or if you've organized a fundraiser yourself that didn't have to do with an organization. I've seen lots of students do that, and they usually just sort of say in the organization or the description that it was something that they came up with on their own, that they were the founder of it. You might be able to leave the community section blank and just put a little bit more description, but it's perfectly fine if it's not related to a specific organization. I did get to the question about an estimated number of hours for an activity. Yes, an estimated value is perfectly fine. Don't spend too long trying to count up the hours that you did. Let's see. So online courses and webinars delivered by industry specialists. I would say it can be interesting for me to know about that. I've seen students list things like Coursera courses or Harvard Extension School courses. Now, I will say, don't feel like you have to go out and do those things to build your resume. Just list them if it's something that you would have done on your own anyway because you love doing it. I don't want you to feel like you've got to build a resume to stand out. Really, I'm just judging you for the things that I think you're passionate about and you might be likely to include in your college life. But if you've done them because you love doing them, sure, put down those courses. So I see a question here about if you have to submit a CV or resume separately, and I will be getting to that in a moment. And the additional section, I will also talk about that as well. Okay, let me go on to my next slide. So here's some words of wisdom. I've already covered some of them. Choose what's important to you. You don't need to fill out all 10. Don't think of it as what you can contribute, but what kind of a match you are. Really, it's bringing you to life. And you don't want to leave things blank or rush through it. Now, as I said, it is okay if you don't have all 10 activities, but you would be surprised how many applications I read where somebody just leaves the activity section completely blank, doesn't even put down one single activity. And I think that's a lost opportunity for me to get to know more about the student. And same with rushing through it. You don't have to labor over the activity section, but you don't want to be so hasty trying to do it at the last minute that there's mistakes, typos, or you've left something out. You don't have to try too hard to impress. And just think about really what these activities show about the future self that you're trying to become. So should you submit a CV or a resume? It's not necessary. You really don't have to labor over a CV or a resume because you've got this activity section. But there are some students who want to do it. You don't have to get fancy with it. So you don't have to choose the perfect font or the perfect layout or colors. You can if you want, but if you're strapped for time, you don't have to make it fancy looking. You might want to do a CV if you've got more than 10 activities, if you've got a lot of description to use, if you need to add that extra detail, or if you want to group it in a different way by category or by leadership or service instead of by chronology. And I like this little cartoon here because sometimes students might take an activity. I worked at McDonald's and they use language that was, I was an associate at a multinational firm in the service industry with revenue over 20 billion, served as the liaison to the automotive industry. It's a little bit of a stretch. So really, you have to have a balance between the two. I'd rather see that you worked at a drive-thru at McDonald's than to see this language that is trying to massage it into something that it's really not. And we want you to be truthful and true to yourself. So here's an example of, well, I'll let you decide. Is it a good example? Is it a bad example? I put this on here, and I'll first mention that the examples that I've used are not from students from India. They're from different countries because I don't want anyone comparing themselves to these examples. But here I chose this because I thought the language just didn't leave a good impression. It didn't sound like the voice of a high school senior, and it gave me an odd impression of who I might see showing up on my campus because the student says, worked as an external relations manager. I coordinated the work of my team and recruited members and oversaw public relations strategies. To me, that just seems like a corporate job. It doesn't seem like something that a high school student would do. And the whole resume was like this, the whole activity section. A marketing specialist conducted study abroad information from US admissions and led my team to complete insights. So really, was that just a student who was an ambassador at a college fair? That's perfectly fine to say that you were an ambassador at a college fair and you helped admission officers get to know your school. You don't have to create some awkward language that tries to make it sound more corporate than it is. I want it to be your language, and I want to understand right away what it is that you've done. And let's see if there's another one here. I'll go into the next example. So the next example, this one I think is a little bit more successful. You can see from the descriptions and everything is just very clear. Social justice, head of the social work club at the school. And the student said, I initiated and led an awareness campaign, Rats of the Shah Dola. So it's very clear language. And online blogger, columnist at the Daily Times newspaper. So that fits under journalism. I wrote newspaper articles and online blogs pertaining to feminist issues. So you can use pretty simple language to be very descriptive and get to the point. That's what you want to do. You want to get to the point so that I'm reading it in my short amount of time and I understand clearly what you're doing. So don't use language that tries to make it sound more mature or corporate than it is. I think that was it for my activity section. I'm going to go back to questions.